People don't understand their natural advantages, and they don't use them. That's bad, number one. But worse, number two, if you don't think you're a good ice skater, or if you're convinced you're not a good cellist, you're not going out and try it. But people are buying stocks anyway. They're not discouraged, they just think it's a gamble.
We begin with Peter Lynch. Time magazine has called him America's #1 money manager. During the 13 years he headed the Fidelity Magellan Fund, it was a top-ranked general equity mutual fund. His new book, Beating the Street, offers advice on picking stocks and maximizing profits, and he's here to talk to us about a lot of things. Peter, welcome to the broadcast. You wrote a book called One Up on Wall Street, and I think that's one of the best-selling books ever about Wall Street, if I'm not correct, and you can correct me. And so why then did you write another book?
Okay. I think the reason I wrote it is I try to explain to people their great advantages, their edges they have, and that they should get involved in stocks. And they should do it on the right basis.
This was on the first book.
Right. And obviously I didn't make a great impression because the percent of people's assets involved in stocks has gone down. In 1960, people had 40% of their financial assets, including their house, in stocks and mutual funds. In 80, that was down to 25%. It's now down to 17%.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think people, in the decade of the 80s was the best decade this century for stocks. I think people managed to lose money in the 80s doing it themselves because their methods were so flawed. So I really feel as though I wanted people to understand. I don't want anybody to buy a stock. I'm saying if you're going to buy a stock, you should do certain things. If you're not willing to do these things, you should leave your money in the bank.
Your philosophy is simple, and I'm remembering this from the previous book. I think we're now talking about the previous book.
Correct.
Your philosophy was, if you find something that you identify with. I remember there was a story of your wife and her hose. Your wife kept saying,
legs
these
and
are
the panties. Oh, you got it.
The legs and panties. Your wife said, these are the greatest things I've ever seen. And when your wife said that, you knew that this was a product that was better. You used to stay at La Quinta Motel, and the service was better, whatever was better.
The price was good,
and
too.
the price was good too. And you said, this is a place that I can determine. I, Peter Lynch, can tell that this is a good product, right? And if these people make a good product, then their earnings are going to go up. Therefore, the stock's going to go up. And that's the kind of decision-making process you ought to go through. Do I have it?
You've got it exactly right. Well, I don't think people understand there's 100% correlation with what happens to a company's earnings over several years and what happens to the stock. If the company, McDonald's, has done very well as a company, the stock has done very well. People worry about too much money supply, what's happened to the price of oil, who's the president, who's being nominated for the Supreme Court,
it's all
the ozone layer. There's nothing to do. McDonald's earnings go up the next 10 years, the stock will go up.
But what they will say to you, Peter, is that, as you know, and why am I telling you this, but it's fun to tell you this, they're telling you that these other things influence the amount of earnings of a particular company. If we're in a recession, people are not going to spend as much money on going to the movies or whatever they do. And therefore, you got to pay attention to these other things because they impact on earnings.
They are very important, but you have no idea of knowing what they're going to do. Alan Greenspan's the head of the Federal Reserve.